Okay, we're back again here at allpointstv.com, and we're here to do another segment of the program called What's Going On. We come on at 2 o'clock, and you can pick us up on YouTube at your leisure and also on Rumble. And we are making a few strides over there. I want to thank you, Rumble, for staying aboard, and want to thank all of the listeners for tuning us in. We're trying to come from a different direction than some of the other stations, but I have to tell you, some of the persons I admire out there that's doing a great job. I think the number one program on television or any media at this point is really the program on Fox. It comes on 8 o'clock Eastern time, and that's a program by the great Tucker Carlson. You know, I just don't think anything is anywhere close to this man's program. This man is a national treasure. And when he left, he wasn't there a week before last. And when he was gone, I stopped watching Fox. So he came back. He came back last Monday. I can't watch a lot of the programs on Fox anymore. What is that? They say a leopard can't change his spots. Well, that's not true of networks. Fox used to be a conservative network, and they have. I thought when Chris Wallace left, and Shepard Smith was Shepard Smith.
Shepler Smith, isn't it?
Yeah,
Shepler,
yeah. When he left, I thought that when they left, we got rid of all the ones hiding out over there. These are the rhinos in the media. I didn't know what they were doing on Fox. I thought once Chris Wallace backed up and went over to CNN where he belonged all the time, and where's Shepard now? I think Shepard's is he at MSNBC? I think he's at MSNBC. Anyway, they should be more at home there. But when they left, I think that Brad Bear is taking their place. He sounds just like they sounded. Brett Bear, maybe you need to go over there. But the person that stands out at that network, and that network does have on it Mark Levine. Mark Levine only comes on once a week, comes on Sundays at 8 o'clock. And he does a very good job. But there's nobody in the media, this is my own view, that is anywhere close to the kind of programming that Tucker Carlson puts on 5 days a week. And when he's gone, they can have some good substitutes, but there's nobody, in my view, that can touch this guy. This guy is, I really thought when O'Reilly left, that slot was going to be very hard to fill because O'Reilly was the number one cable news program for 14 years in a row counting. And when he made a couple of mistakes in some of his judgment calls and did some things that were certainly not to be allowed at any network, and facing a suit if they did not, in fact, take an action against it, they forced him out. And I didn't think anybody was going to be able to fill his shoes because those are some pretty big shoes to fill. But Carson came in after being somewhere on the sideline for a number of years at the network, came in, and after a short period of time, his program caught fire, and now that is the program on Fox that ignites all the rest of the programs. It leads into Sean Hannity and Laura Ingraham. And to an extent, the program that comes on after that, after Laura Ingram's program, and then there are two programs come on after that. What's her name? Laura Brain, I think her name is Brain, that comes on at 12. She got I think they're changing her shift, and I think she's coming on more prime time. Can't think of her first name now, but I think her last name is Brain. I don't stay up that late to watch her. I should tape a program because she's pretty good in what she does. But I'm telling you that if you're not tuning in, Tucker Carlson show, and maybe and Mark Levine's program. Mark Levine did a good show last night. Also, he had on there. You know, one of the things that Mark Levine, I have to commend you again. I commended you last week for you having gone into the Constitution, was reading it verbatim from the document, starting with the First Amendment. I think you went through the first 5 or 6 amendments. And what I liked about it is that you read the amendments because you know, open up the Constitution and reading it is too much work for a lot of people. They don't want to open the book up where that document is found and then read the Constitution. I was very happy that Mark Levine did that 2 weeks ago. Did that not yesterday, did Sunday, a week from this past Sunday. And I commend him for that. Now, last night on Mark Levine's program, he had on there the son-in-law of the former president, and I thought that was really amazing because it cleared up a lot of things. You know, one of the tabloids was talking about how much friction was going on in that family. It seemed like on the one side was the 2 older sons of the former president, and on the other side was Kirshner and the daughter's name. You know, these names. What's her name? The daughter, John. What's the daughter's name of Trump?
I didn't hear what you said. Sorry.
What's the president's daughter's name?
The president?
The one, the president, the 45th president, Trump's daughter.
There's Ivanka.
Ivanka.
And there's another one too. There's like 3, I think Tiffany or
Tiffany's one.
There's like 3 of them. Yeah, she had 2. Yeah.
The one is married to Kushner.
Oh, that's yeah. Hold on there.
That's her. That's Ivanka.
Ivanka. I think that's Ivanka. Yeah.
Yeah, Ivanka. Yeah. You know, it's probably a lot of friction in that family. You know, you can read that. I got that from the tabloid. But a lot of these papers are reading like the tabloid right now. New York Times like the tabloid. So is the Washington Post. But they had in there on one in the Inquirer, they had like there was a big feud going on in the family between Kushner and of course Ivanka is going to take his side. And they had it like it was a real fight going on between the in-law, the daughter, the 2 sons, and Trump. And it's like Trump and the 2 sons, and then Ivanka and her husband on the other side. But last night on that program, and I thank you for this one also, Mark Levine, they had on there. I had never heard the guy before. I knew who he was, but he came across very well. And he said that he and his father-in-law, Donald Trump, had been out for a round of golf, and they were talking about what they had accomplished during the administration. He seems very proud of what they had accomplished during the 4 years that Donald Trump was in office. And who would not be proud of that record? They accomplished more probably in that 4-year time period than any president we've had in history. This president got a lot done. You know, not that it's going to make a lot of difference in the voting public, because it's not just the politicians we got a problem with, Houston. We got a problem with the American people in this country. I don't know how much you have to do to damage this country for them to realize how dangerous the Democratic Party, as its president constituted, is in this country today. This is a very dangerous party. and that the socialist road this party is on and carrying this country down that road is not a very good thing for this country. This country was based upon implicit capitalism in the documents of the country. In fact, that's a criticism that Ayn Rand has, one of the few criticisms that she had for the framers, and that is that they did not make their capitalist propositions explicit in the Constitution, but it's certainly implied by government hands-off, restriction of government power, the placement of power in different corridors of the government and things of that sort, and the check and balance system. All that implies a hands-off approach. You can call it laissez-faire if you were in France, but the laissez-faire approach to government involved in the country's economy, which you can see very good. We don't have a problem saying separation of church and state, but the framers, and that's not as much the case as it was, the framers intended to have a separation between the economy and the state. That's more explicitly the point of view of the framers than it is for the separation of church and state, which is something made up after reading into the Constitution in Engel versus Vitale case in 1962. You can make that up and say that was an intended separation of church and state. What the Constitution did not intend is to have a theocratic state. That's why you could have freedom of religion and also freedom from religion. But there's no intended separation of church and state in terms of having that explicit separation. What they were trying to do was make sure that you would not use religion to suppress other religions like it had happened in the churches in Europe. Let's say in the Lutheran Church in 1517. I think I'm right here. In the German church, the Lutheran Church, I think that it was 1517 when they set up the Protestant movement, started in Germany with Martin Luther, and I think he tacked those 96 theses on the church wall in Wittenberg, Germany, and tacked up 96 complaints against the Catholic Church. And in that year, you would have the beginning of what's called the Protestant movement. They didn't want to have that, is what I'm saying. They didn't want to have a theocratic state so that other religions could not be practiced. And so that's where they drew a line. The First Amendment talks about freedom of religion, but it also implies that you have the freedom from religion as well. There's no dictating of what your religious views are, but the First Amendment protects whatever those views are, and that includes the atheist views as well, where you have the right to no religious views. Good luck on that one. But this idea that it's interesting, they see a separation of church and state, but no separation between the economy and the state. That's really what the problem is, getting the government's hands off of the economy, which is not going to do, because that's where the fiduciary claims can be made against the wealth created by the people out here working. That was that song called "Working Day and Night." Got me working day and night. And then the government has its hands out once the work is done, and it wants its cut. And its cut keeps going up exponentially as they demand more and more of the wealth that's created, so they can spend more on these boondoggle programs to get reelected, and that was not intended. In fact, we didn't even have that until 1913. You know, the government couldn't reach into our pockets. I mean, the federal government could not reach into our pockets. The idea of an income tax was a state assessment. It did not become a federal assessment until 1913 with the passage of the 16th Amendment. We made two horrendous mistakes in that year. That's the first one in 1913 that was proposed by the Congress and ratified by 3/4 of the states that had lost their mind, putting an income tax upon their citizens when that was really to be a state assessment and not a federal assessment. And they changed it. I wish they would just leave that which was in place alone. That was put there by the framers. Because I'll tell you something: there's nobody that you have in the Congress, not even in the early beginnings of the United States, when the revolutionaries were still there, and the ones that had met in the convention in Philadelphia in 1787. I know they're going to tell me May the 25th to September the 17th, 1787. And I will agree with you that that would be when they finally got a quorum. They were supposed to be goddamn the 14th of May, but did not do so and didn't have a quorum to start meeting until the 25th. So they were dating on the 25th. My dating will be a month later. They had a lot of house cleaning to do and a lot of, getting situated. And when they really got down to brass tacks and began to take care of business, is really around June 25th. But that's just George Moss speaking. And I'm not on television, so you got to be on television in order to get listened to. You have to be invited on some of these cable stations like Alan Dershowitz and Jonathan Turley. And then if you're invited on TV, you're a constitutional scholar. I'm going to say a couple of things here. I'm going to teach something on the impeachment today, and I'm going to say some things here. And this won't get me invited on television, nor am I seeking that. But none of these television scholars are going to say anything once I teach what I'm teaching today. And they have nothing to say behind what I'll say. And I keep calling them out, and they keep hiding. But we're not saying the same thing. And because we're saying opposite things, we can't both be right. So I'm just going to tell you, I'm right and they're wrong. I'm going to resolve that problem right now. I'm right and they're wrong. Let me start out. You have to go in that room and read the notes. And then you have to be grounded in the Federalist Papers, because the ones that wrote, Madison, I don't think John Jay was there. I have to go back and look at that. I don't know if John Jay was there. I know, Madison, there were three representatives from New York. Two of them left. Robert Yates and James Lansing, I think his name was, were from New York. They left, and Hamilton was left there by himself. But that's all right, because Hamilton played when Hamilton spoke in that convention, a lot of people would sit up and pay attention. They knew they had somebody in that room that was above a lot of their pay grade. Hamilton was really the smartest person in that room. And that accounts for why he wrote 51 of the 85 Federalist Papers. The only one close to him was James Madison, wrote 29 of them. And John Jay, who had gotten sick, wrote 5 of them. 2, 3, 4, and 5, and 64. 2, 3, 4, and 5, and then 64 would be the 5 that he wrote. and then the other 80 were written between two men, with Hamilton being the dominant voice. Now, I have to say a couple of things here because I want to clear up a lot of things here about the impeachment process, because I have to come behind a lot of people, including Wikipedia. I was looking at that a couple of weeks ago. I was looking at what they had on Wikipedia. I typed in the question. Can a senator be impeached? And the answer came back that William Blount was impeached, therefore a senator can be impeached. Now, let me tell you something. Just because it's just like my mom used to tell me when I would tell her, well, so-and-so did this, she would tell me, well, two rights don't make a wrong. Two wrongs don't make a right. That's what she would say. So my point here about William Blount is that just because they got it wrong in 1797 does not mean we have to continue to get it wrong today. They're wrong in doing that and in 1797. And if we do it in this time period, we're also wrong again. You know, I'll tell you one thing that I'll say about William Blount as well. I'm surprised that William Blount would have accepted that he could be impeached, because William Blount was one of the persons who was one of the 55 members of the Constitutional Convention. Now, he's not the senator, as he will later on be, but he's a senator from Tennessee. When Tennessee becomes a state, Tennessee became a state, don't tell me, in 1796. And when William Blount was in the Constitutional Convention, don't forget we only had 13 states. And he's now a person at the convention representing North Carolina. Tennessee is not one of the 13 colonies, obviously, and doesn't become a state until after the Constitution had been ratified. The ratification of the Constitution occurring in 1788. But they put it in place in 17 by September 17, 1787. Now, what I noticed in reading the notes of James Madison took notes, a diary, and he did a very good job. Now, sometimes there are certain gaps in what Madison was writing. We can then go to Yates, Robert Yates. Robert Yates also took notes, and so we can, when we look for some ways of filling in some of the gaps in what Madison wrote, we can go and look at the notes that Yates has and fill in those gaps from Yates' notes. Although Yates was later on storm back home and leave Hamilton there by himself. He and Lansing left. They had three there from New York, but one that actually stayed there. But I'm glad he stayed, because the elephant in that room was Alexander Hamilton. He was the smartest person in that room. He didn't say a lot on the floor, but you can see that you could tell by the comments they were making in the aftermath of the comments he made, that when Hamilton spoke, everybody kind of sat up a little bit more and they were paying attention to what Hamilton was saying. Now, William Blount. Let me say something about William Blount. I gleaned this from the fact that Blount was only 40 people at the Constitutional Convention. There were 55 of them that were there at some point. Only 40 of them actually said anything on the floor. Yeah, I went through the document and counted them. 40 people spoke, including George Washington, who was not sent there as a delegate, but George Washington was there. You know, first of all, George Washington decided not to go at first, but then, you know, George Washington recognized his standing as the most respected figure in the country at that time. And how would it have looked if George Washington did not go. Something about the patriotism of it. And he went there, and they made him the president of the Constitutional Convention. And I would say this about some of the deliberations. You read the document, those of you who want to go and read Madison's notes, and then pick up the slack for what Madison left out in some of the notes, because some of it is you have to merge the notes of Madison and Yates, and then you can kind of see what happened on certain days when it's not quite as complete. I would say this too. I wish that the Madison had published his notes when Hamilton was alive, because those notes were not published until 1814, but I'm thinking 1816 is one of those two dates. And by that time, Hamilton is dead, having been in a duel with Aaron Burr. And so they were not there to verify what Madison said, because it's Madison that's putting his fingers on who wrote which ones of the Federalist Papers. And there are some scholars that look at the writing style, and some have claimed that some of them are misplaced in terms of what they wrote. I'm going with 50, one of them written by Hamilton, 29 by James Madison, 5 by John Jay. But some of it is questionable, but the writing styles kind of give you some idea of who wrote what, because they all wrote under the same name, Publius. Your writing style is your writing style. That's what I can tell you from personal experience, because my writing style was one I was called up to the desk of Mr. Reed's class, because the writing style of two papers were the same, and she picked it up, and she knew that writing style was the same in two cases, called both up to her desk, and she knew something was going on there, but she thought it had been copied out of a book. I had written both papers, but I don't know if she knew that or not, but maybe when she challenged the reports, maybe she was able to find that out, because I was told it was my paper, but the other guy couldn't say anything about his paper, so maybe she knew he didn't write his. But you can tell by the writing style, pretty much, if you go through it meticulously enough, and you kind of look at the ones that's in question, you look at the writing style to say that doesn't read the way the other works that James Madison wrote, for example, because the writing styles of these two men are very, very distinct. But what I'm surprised about with William Blount was the senator, the only senator that was in fact impeached. Now, what Wikipedia did was say, because they impeached us, because they impeached the senator, and that impeachment of the senator had occurred, and I guess they're saying it was only 10 years away from the Constitutional Convention, that it must be allowed in the Constitution for a senator to be impeached. Let me tell in a second, the Wikipedia, that is total nonsense. And I can tell you that's nonsense, because not only, I'm going to read from the document, but I can tell you about what they discussed in the Constitutional Convention too. Because one of the big problems they had in dealing with the admission, which was the admission, was to revise the Articles of Confederation and not go any further than its revision. That was a specific charge of what they'd been sent to Philadelphia to do. And they went beyond that. And it seems to me when they first got there, they had already intended, they went there with the intention of doing more than revising the document. They went there, what seemed like, with the intention of throwing the document out. So what I'm surprised about is that, well, I'm not going to say I'm surprised. and I'll explain why I'm not surprised that Blunt did not raise the question about impeachment having been in the room when it was discussed. Because what that tells me is this. Sometimes at the Constitutional Convention, what they would do is meet as a total group. So all 55 members are meeting. Sometimes they would break off into areas of specialty and they would go into smaller groups. And I would excuse Blunt for not raising the question of not being able to impeach a senator or a member of the House because he was not privy to those discussions that were going on in smaller breakout sessions from a larger group. Maybe he was part of that. But he should have raised it because I can tell you right now that just because it happened at one time in 1797 with William Blount, who by this time is one of the first, he was one of the first two senators from the state of Tennessee, had moved by that time and had gotten into a little bit of trouble as a land speculator and tried to dig himself out by doing some things that were just inappropriate. And he did what, if you're going to do some things that you're doing things that should not be done and it's questionable, you don't want to leave your thumbprint on it. And Blunt had his name on a document and he could not deny that he was involved in what he was involved in, which is really egregious because what he was involved in as a land speculator, he was trying to sick the Creek and I think it was the Cherokee, trying to get them to attack the Spanish, and then that would turn the property over to the British, and therefore he'd be absorbed with some of the debt he'd gotten himself into in speculation. And they found that and decided they were going to, in fact, put him out of the Senate through the impeachment process, and that's how that happened. But you cannot impeach a senator, and you cannot impeach a member of the House, although it happened in that one case. Now, how do you explain that? I explain it by not all the ones in that room are in the Congress at the time that Blunt was impeached. But it's very clear the Constitution does not allow for a member of the House and Senate to be impeached. And I'm going to read something to you here to let you see the inappropriateness of the comment that Wikipedia is making right now. They need to change it. And I might call them to talk to them about it because you don't need to be passing out this bad information and making it and spreading this nonsense that's being spread by Alan Dershowitz. And I heard a student, they claim that Ted Cruz was his greatest student. I've heard him mouth this nonsense also. The nonsense that you have to have treason, bribery, other high crimes and misdemeanors in order to bring about impeachment. That's total nonsense. But let me read about the Blunt situation. Let me read Article 1, Section 6, Clause 2. And I'm going to read something here to you. And you scholars pay strict attention here. I don't want to leave out a single word, so I'm going to put my glasses on so I can read every word of it here, like Mark Levine did. No senator or representative shall, during the time for which he was elected, be appointed to any civil office under the authority of the United States. All you scholars read that. But what you don't get from it is that if you don't get why they placed it in there. They placed it in there because if a senator or a member of the House accepts, let me read it again, any civil office under the authority of the United States, it would be a conflict of interest. Because as representatives of the state, and then being an officer of the United States, the conflict is which one of the two masters do you serve in the separate roles intended, but now they've been merged by having a state civil office holder now also being a federal civil office holder. That's the intent of it. And you can see it in terms of the word. I keep saying this over and over again because I want to drill into I'm the only one out here teaching this, so I'm trying to drill in public consciousness that there's a word missing here if the intent was different than what I'm saying. It doesn't say, for example, no senator or representative shall, during the time for which he was elected, be appointed to any other civil office holder, to any other civil officers under the authority of the United States. If it said any other, that would then place the senators and the members of the House under the authority as a civil office holder of the United States. It doesn't say other, so it leaves that out consciously because they recognize that convention that these are not civil office holders of the United States. They are civil office holders. But each state elects its own civil office holders. And that's what they were doing, electing them and sending them to be a part of the federal government as the watchdogs for the interests of the states. That's why they have them separated from the civil office holders of the United States, because they're not there as civil office holders of the United States. They are civil office holders and watchdogs of the states from which they are elected, each state having its own separate interests because it has its own separate sovereignty. So the only way I can excuse William Blount for not raising that is because he was not privy to this conversation that was going on at the time that the impeachment part of the Constitution was in fact drawn up in Article 1, Section 2, Clause 5, and then Article 1, Section 3, Clause 6, and then Article 2, Section 4. The three provisions in the Constitution deals with the impeachment. Now, in Article 1, Section 2, Clause 5, it says the speaker, the House shall choose a speaker and shall have the sole power of impeachment. I'll read it to you because I don't want you to think I'm making this up. So I'll read it. Article 1, Section 2. Now, why is it in Section 2? Because Section 2 of the Article 1 sets up the House of Representatives. So let me go to the 5th clause of Article 1, Section 2, and then it reads this way. The House of Representatives shall choose their speaker. And they really should have said the House of Representatives should choose its speaker. Not choose their speaker. I'm not choose their speaker, choose its speaker. Because we're talking about the House of Representatives as a body. Ms. Reed would not have liked that very much. You know, these English teachers at that time were very meticulous about how you use the language. And I remember they had, you probably remember that commercial about Winston cigarettes. And the commercial was saying, Winston tastes good. Winston tastes good like a cigarette should. And that one elderly English teacher from way back in the old school wrote them a letter and was chastising them on using the wrong language. And she said, what you should have said, Winston tastes good as a cigarette should, not like a cigarette should. Well, okay, that's the point I'm raising here. The House of Representatives is a body. So it should have read, just nitpicking, but it's not major to the main point here. The main point here is that it excludes members of the House and Senate from being civil office holders by the language that's placed in Article 1, Section 6, Clause 2. So Blunt did not raise that when he was impeached, and that's because I would assume that Blunt was not in the room when the impeachment clause was in fact brought up, and that would be why he allowed that process to go through without the objection. But take my word for it, and you can go read it for yourself in the Constitution. Members of the House and Senate cannot be impeached. And in Article 1, Section 5, Clause 2, that's another example of it and more proof of the claim that I'm making here. Let me read Article 1, Section 5, Clause 2. Because if they could be removed through the impeachment process, then this part of the document is repetitive. And the one thing you don't find in the Constitution is the document repeating itself. Each house, this is Article 1, Section 5, Clause 2. Each house may determine the rules of its proceedings, punish its members for disorderly behavior, and with the concurrence of 2/3, expel a member. The House can, by 2/3 vote, expel members in the House. The Senate, by 2/3 vote in the Senate, can expel a member in the Senate. But the House does not have anything to do with the deliberation in the Senate, nor does the Senate have anything to do with the deliberations in the House. I think you can see that in what's discussed on June 7th, 1787. As they were trying to put together how they gonna set up the legislative body, because they got to figure that out. And they've already determined that the first house in the Congress, because they now want a bicameral legislative rather than unicameral. So they have determined that the House will be based upon the state carved up into districts so that the voice of the people could be heard. That's why it's a people's body, because you carve it up into districts that's closest to the people, and the people's body would be the House of Representatives based upon that. But the state as a collective body should have a voice. Why would that be the case? Because if the states are not involved in the equation, then how are you going to get the legislatures to ratify the document if the legislative body is not included in the process? And so they have to figure out, okay, we got the members of the House figured out. We're going to have districts, and we're going to have the House based upon a state's population, and we're going to divvy the number of representatives by the population of the states. But how are we going to do this more difficult task here in terms of of what we're going to do about the states. How are we going to allocate that? Well, we got a real problem here because there are two interests at the convention in that regard. One interest is that of the creditors. And those persons are very fearful that if they have a majority voice in the Senate as well as in the House, then the people can gang up on the creditors, and the money that has been loaned, for example, during the Revolutionary War and now to be paid at some point, can be voted against the creditors who are now in a minority group, and they will be penalized because of that. So they definitely want to protect their own fiduciary interests. The small states also have a stake in it as well, and that is their point is that the small states are concerned about the question of liberty. The large states will, in fact, have a larger voice and role, and the minority voice, which would be a smaller voice, but the same sovereignty because they're all states, would be gobbled up in the numbers, as would be the case in the House of Representatives also. And so the Connecticut plan comes in, and the Connecticut plan was one in which you would have one house based upon population, and then you have another house, that'd be the Senate, based upon the equal representation of the states because each of them are equally sovereign in their independence. Don't forget, this is a confederation we're talking about. And so the Senate then was based upon the equanimity, sharing that equanimity among the states, each state having 2 senators regardless as to the size, so that no one state would have a greater voice in the Senate, but would have one in the House. But you see, the Senate and the House must agree on bills that are passed, and each house can, in fact, introduce a bill, except bills that pertain to money. Only the House of Representatives can originate bills that have to do with taxation, revenue, and things of that sort, because they want the people whose representatives are closest to them to make the determination, because the people can see them acting whatever ways they're acting, because you see what governments want more than anything else. They can talk about liberty, they can talk about our democracy. I hear them talking about all these things. Don't believe a word of it. When they start saying our democracy, or they talk about they want to maintain liberty. What governments want is the finance that allows government to, in fact, spend money as a purchasing of that which keeps them in power. And the framers wanted to restrict that. And that's why the revenue issue is consigned only to the House, and no revenue bill can be initiated in the Senate for that reason. Only in the House of Representatives. So if you see how they're putting it together and why they're doing what they're doing, you won't make the mistakes that a lot of them are making. Now, I have a lot of respect for Larry Swigart. A lot of respect for Larry Swigart. Larry Swigart is the co-author of the book called A Patriot's History of the United States. That's a very, very remarkable book. And you're going to be there for a while and reading it because it's not one of those thin books. Alan Dershowitz writes thin books. I think he likes to have the name on different things. I see a lot of narcissism because the man tries to act like he's an expert in the Constitution, which he's not.
The thing is, and I know I'm not saying this, and I hope I don't offend you by this, but I was in a college, I worked at the universities for years, and I saw that there was a great deal of egotism, and
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, well, thing is, what is it? Henry Kissinger said about the bitterness within, rivalry and stuff within academics is because the stakes are so small. And, but it actually isn't small though. Cause look they're actually sending these bizarre people. If I was on campus, heard these people talking about the stuff like, this transgender, all this cis stuff and all that, I would like roll my eyes like, a passing fad. And now it's this is becoming more critical for us to look at this, they think, than the serious issues we're facing in this country. So, academia is filled full of very arrogant.
Oh, it's very arrogant because because I saw a debate between the name you gave me last week that wrote Organized Crime.
Mr. Lorenzo?
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't know why I can't think of De Lorenzo's name. Tell me De Lorenzo. De Lorenzo was debating a Lincoln scholar. Now, De Lorenzo is more of a polymath. He's a little bit in this area here, a little bit in this area. He's in a lot of different areas. But he was debating a scholar on Abraham Lincoln, and that was his wheelhouse. And for him to be debating De Lorenzo, who had written a book called Lincoln Unmasked and The Real Lincoln, which this scholar, I can't think of his name right now, did not appreciate him coming in his area and questioning Lincoln's greatness. Not that he was questioning Lincoln's greatness. What he was doing was putting into a perspective of the real Lincoln. One of De Lorenzo's books is The Real Lincoln. And his thesis is not any different than the thesis that was written by the writer, he's passed now, he used to be the writer, Lerone Bennett Jr., who was a historian in residence for Ebony Magazine, the Johnson Company. And Lerone Bennett had written a couple of history books, one of which was Before the Mayflower, and then Black Reconstruction, one of his good books. And then Lincoln's, he wrote a book also, Force into Glory, a book on Abraham Lincoln. And of course, that's not that you got people in that area now, and you're entering that area, and you're in a lot of different areas with a little bit of information in a lot of different areas, and that's all they make. And they major in that. You in that area, you have a problem because they do not want you coming in their wheelhouse, and they don't think you belong there. But there's a dimension to Lincoln that they're not talking about, don't know. They need to go back and do a little bit more reading themselves in that area, although they are strong in that area. But there are a lot of things about Lincoln that they have missed. I'm trying to think of what page number that was in the book written by Foner. I think it's page 145 of Philip S. Foner's book. And I don't know if they go read that page there about Abraham Lincoln and Joshua Speed. Read that page and see if he knows anything about that. Okay, leave that alone. There's another Lincoln that's not in the purview of these scholars there too. But I give them credit for him, this guy that De Lorenzo was debating, being the top scholar in that area. He is definitely a scholar. He knows every I and every T. The documents, he knew the documents. He did not like De Lorenzo coming in there debating him. There's a lot like John Henry Clark, who would say things like this as he looked down at his nose at person he thought was beneath him. John Henry Clark used to say that I only debate my equals, the rest I teach. So there is this braggadocious point of view in the scholarly world. I don't brag about where I am in this field of the Constitution. I'm making a claim here that I listen to them, and I'm making this claim here based upon I listen to them and I know what they're saying is not true, and I'm on the same level with them and beyond them, because what they're saying cannot be proven by this document. And everything I say about this document I can prove. And they cannot prove anything that they're saying about the impeachment, because what they're saying about the impeachment is wrong. And none of them challenge each other about what they're saying about impeachment. So all of them are wrong about it as well. The impeachment process, as it's spelled out in the Constitution, can only go on the federal level with federal civil office holders. And that's why it says in Article 2, Section 4, the president, vice president, and all civil officers of the United States, all civil office holders of the United States shall be removed from office upon impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors. That does not mean that you have to have that to impeach. That's where Dershowitz was confused, and all the rest of them are confused. You have to have that for removal. But you can impeach a federal civil office holder on anything, providing you have a majority vote in the House. And I'm going to also say this, and Lawrence Tribe said that the person is not impeached until it's referred to the Senate. You know what? I hate to say this because it sounds like I'm being nasty, but I have to tell you something. You have to be stupid to say that. You don't have to refer impeachment to the Senate. And I'll tell you why next week when we come back to finish this up. But take my word for it that what I'm going to be teaching here about the impeachment process is grounded in the Constitution, and what they're saying is not grounded in the Constitution because they don't know this document. And I do. And that's why they remain quiet. It's not they don't know I'm out here. Okay, I got to get out of here. I want you to follow your dream. If you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.